At Quite the Thing Media, we aim to bring you the best podcasts produced by independent creators, made without constraints.
Podcast Father here. Join me on my journey as I start out as the indie podcaster.
You've been searching for a podcast. Want to know about some great artists? You've come to the right place. Indie Podcaster with your host, the Podcast Father.
Welcome to Indie Podcaster. Thanks for listening and supporting. I'm your host, Jeff, aka Podcast Father. Mike Zago from The Link, a podcast with Mike Zago, joins me today. What's going on, Michelangelo?
How's it going? Also, Michelangelo, cool Ninja Turtle, but Donatello, actually my favorite.
You would say something like that. Just take it, man. Michelangelo.
All right.
Tell us about your pod.
Turtles
man.
are good.
It's been a few episodes since we've really plugged your pod. Tell us about it.
My pod I'm having a lot of fun with. I like artists in all different ways, and I didn't really want to pigeonhole myself into one little niche for my podcast. I want to cover all the things I like. It's funny, I actually didn't know what to start it on. I thought I needed a topic, and I was trying to find some way, some link between all the things that I like: sports, music, movies, TV, books, video games, everything. But I realized that the podcast is the link between all those things. When I look back on it and I have 150 episodes or whatever, this will be how I define all the different things that I like. So I mix it up, but it's been pretty good and going pretty well. So everyone should listen at @thelink_podcast on all your social medias.
Incredible. You've practiced that, haven't you?
Oh yeah, I got a script, baby. Nah, it's off the cuff, or you'll never know. So just listen to my podcast and you'll find out more.
You wrote it on your sweaty hand in that 120-degree room that you're recording in.
Hot. I'm doing okay, though. I'm over it mentally. We're breaking it.
So today, we're going to share an interview I had with Gary Morgenstein. Now, Gary, man, Mike, this guy has had such a long, decorative, spectacular career. Did you get a look into some of Gary's work?
He's so cool. I mean, there's been so many cool things that he's done, but anyone who writes a dystopian sci-fi baseball novel just understands how to combine all the things that I like into one thing. It's just awesome.
So you're referring to A Fastball for Freedom. We did discuss his new novel in this interview, but don't sleep on Gary because, man, Gary has experience writing for PWI Wrestling Magazine. He's got experience in theater. He worked for the Sci-Fi Network for several years. It's a great conversation. He has so much experience and advice for people. It's incredible.
I could go on and on about how cool this guy is. He really is. But also, I want to keep this intro short because it's cool. You got to listen to the pod. So just keep listening. It's going to come. Here we go.
I will say one thing, though. He is in the heart of Brooklyn, and it sounds like at some points in time, the cops are about to pound his door down.
It's great. It makes it even better. I mean, I'm a New Yorker, so it's just kind of feels like home. But yeah, it's nice. It gives it some intrigue. Yeah,
I don't know, Spider-Man was outside or what, but there was some crime or something. So.
Oh, yeah, there's webs being slung.
Gary is awesome, and make sure that you stay tuned for this whole entire interview and support him. It is incredible. But before we get started, I'm going to share a little business. Myself and this podcast are proud members of Quite the Thing Media. Make sure you're checking out Quite the Thing Media. Go to quitethethingmedia.com. If you want to go to my personal site, it's actually at Quite the Thing Media. quitethingmedia.com/podcastfather. There you can request to be on this podcast as a guest. Also, a review from me on site. Make sure you're checking out all the great original podcasts on site and the independent creators on site. quitethingmedia.com. Couldn't do this podcast without the hosting platform, Captivate FM. Captivate FM is great, guys. I can't tell you how great it is. I could talk about it all day, but I will tell you one thing. For me, as a new podcaster, it's amazing. There's all sorts of tools, growth labs, etc. The team is so hands-on at Captivate FM. They will help you through your journey. If you're a podcaster or content creator, you want to distribute your stuff, go to CaptivateFM.com. They'll go ahead and give you 7 free days off the bat. But I'll tell you what, if you go to my Quite the Thing Media page, quitethingmedia.com/podcastfather, there at the bottom, you'll find an affiliate link. You can get 30 days of Captivate FM free. Why wouldn't you check it out? Captivate FM. This podcast is sponsored by Good Pods, my great friends at Good Pods. This is an amazing app, guys. You get on there, you see what podcasts your friends and influencers are listening to. Download the Good Pods app. All the music on this podcast is from the artist Young Carts. Young Carts, great independent artist. You got to check out all the work. Go to the site, youngcartsbeats.com. If you want to contact me, you can find me on Twitter at podcast_father, or the podcast actually has an account too at indie_podcaster, or good old fashioned email, always great too, thepodcastfather@gmail.com. If you want to support this podcast, one great way you can do for me is you can go on your favorite podcast listening platform, may that be an Apple or Good Pods, and give me a rating. Throw me a 5-star. Type some nice things to me. If you don't even want to type, don't worry about it. Just throw me some stars. Any feedback is appreciated. I really do appreciate it. If you want to get real crazy and support me, you can always buy me a coffee. Check it out on my Quite the Thing media page. That's enough for the business. Let's get to the view. Gary, it's great to have you today for this interview, man.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here, Jeff.
I'm going to go ahead and give you a minute just to tell the listeners about yourself.
Well, my sixth novel, Fastball for Freedom, came out a few months ago. It's a dystopian science fiction baseball novel. Follows the critically acclaimed A Mound Over Hell, book one in the trilogy. And it's set in the 22nd century as after America and the West has lost World War III to the Islamic Empire, and we're surrounded and baseball's discredited. It begins its final season ever. It's very unique. It's a blending of genres. So I write novels. I also write plays. My new play should be premiering COVID lockdown restrictions willing this year. Black and White Cookie. We were scheduled to premiere last March, but man plans, God laughs. So we got canceled. And I have a background in entertainment PR. I was the mad PR genius behind Sharknado. So there you go.
And that's awesome. And you also have some radio. I was involved on people call it podcasting, but back when I had my last podcast, right? It was before podcasting. It's called internet radio.
Yes.
So, but I don't want to relate that to you. I did see that you have involvement in that in the past.
Back in 2010, for 3 years, I had actually a very popular radio show called Purple Haze on Blog Talk Radio. And this was before the pod era. And my friends would say, oh, that's nice, but maybe someday you'll get a real radio show. It was like,
It's crazy because you never heard the word podcasting back then even.
No. Now there's I think there's 2.2 million podcasts around. I mean, it's pretty staggering. But back then I was a pioneer. It was a weekly show. And at our height, we had about 20,000 downloads, which I don't know if that would be good or bad now. But back then it was pretty good. We had 3 of us, and my hosts, for various reasons, couldn't continue. But it was a lot of fun. Yeah, I've tried to dabble in different things, and I wrote a musical, off-Broadway musical a few years ago called The Anthem, which is sci-fi rock musical. So I like to explore different things.
What would you say looking back at it now, because you've been involved in these industries for quite a while? Growing up, what was your inspiration or kind of your guiding light to get involved in, writing and all the things that you've done?
Like many writers, well, not like many writers, I had a dysfunctional family. Simple as that. So it was a lot easier to create worlds where I dictated the outcome. It's simple as that. And I think a lot of artists, right, not only just writers, but share that. You're loners, so you escape into your own little world and you create things. And I was maybe 8 or 9 years old when I started writing short stories, baseball short stories, because I grew up in the Bronx, 6 blocks from Yankee Stadium. And then my first book was a baseball novel, Take Me Out to the Ball Game, followed by The Man Who Wanted to Play Center Field for the New York Yankees. So baseball has always been a love of mine. And what I've done is, in my recent novels, I brought that, baseball, my love of science fiction, and my love of politics and world building into my book series to create something very different. Because when you create a dystopian world, if you create the world, you're obligated to create rules. And then you have to follow the rules. So you have to be consistent. It's as simple as this. When you're watching a movie or you're reading a book or a TV show and you go, oh, come on, they just took the easy way out. That's not supposed to be allowed in that world. And I don't want anyone to ever read my book and say, oh, come on, you cheated. So there have been times writing it where I've felt like I've almost backed myself into a corner and said, okay, now how am I going to get out of this? I'm like, schmuck, why did you have that law? You're making life difficult for yourself. But that's fun. That's the fun part of it.
That's the creative side of it for sure at its best. So
Yes.
you use baseball, you mentioned, in a lot of these novels because of where you're from and how close you were and are to Yankee Stadium. But also, I'm just going to assume that you use baseball because it is like America's pastime. So baseball being more than just your personal love for the sport, also being what it symbolizes for America.
Exactly. And in the novels, America is not the America that we know for the various reasons. And when you, just to back up a moment, when you write speculative fiction, when you go into the future, it's important to show the reader how this could have happened. You don't want to date yourself. There's no contemporary names at all in my novels. I think maybe in A Fastball for Freedom, this book too, I mentioned Mike Trout because I think Mike Trout's going to be in the Hall of Fame no matter what. But for the most part, there's no Donald Trump or Joe Biden or nothing like that. But yet you have to show how America could have entered decline, how we could have lost World War III. And there is nothing preordained about America staying free, remaining a world power, remaining a democracy. It's just, there's nothing written. It only exists and continues because of the American people, as with any nation. So baseball, as you accurately say, in my novels represents the old America, the great America, and the great democracy, the great free America. And in this world entering the 22nd century, that's no more. And baseball is associated with treason. Supposedly in the 2065 World Series, the seventh game at Amazon Stadium, formerly known as Yankee Stadium, they were part of a terrorist attack to take out the government. It failed, and they ordered all the stadiums in the United States burnt to the ground, except Amazon Stadium.
I did just get the first part of this novel, A Mound Over Hell, on Kindle book.
Thank you.
Which we can touch upon that later about how times have changed, right? And now, the digital age. But A Mound Over Hell, like you've said, this is the first book of what it will be 3, and you just released 2. So that's correct, right? There will be a third.
Yes, I'm writing that now. Yes, a dugout to peace.
To me, just getting into it, this seems like something that maybe you wouldn't have been able to write when you first started. So it's a lifetime of experience, interpretation of society, and then just the information that you've collected and gathered, all put into, the later stage of your life.
Yes. Absolutely right. Yes. You're 100% right on that as well. We are what we are. And as a writer, you're both blessed and cursed with a good memory. And you have it, it's all filled up your own mental computer. So I wanted to blend my view of politics, and there's no ideology here. I mean, there are people who say, well, there's liberal and there's conservative. Well, that's not my point. It doesn't matter anymore. America is run by an entity called the family. There's no democracy, no voting. Voting is illegal. All acts of patriotism are illegal. The flag is illegal because that's felt that sort of hubris got us into war. Social media is illegal under the anti-narcissism laws. The entertainment industry, lawyers, therapists, banks, realtors are banished under the anti-parasite laws. So it's a society built on love and relationships and friendship, and there's no identity politics, but it's sort of a benevolent dictatorship where there's a consensus and people all agree that for the common good, there's very little crime, but the most revered professions are teachers, doctors, and policemen, because if they're bad, lights out, as we know. We're all in trouble. So it's that, but we're surrounded still by the Islamic Empire, and we have to sustain ourselves with, artificial foods, and there's no trade with anyone. We're surrounded. But the leader, grandma, the elderly leader, wants to reach out to the Islamic Empire and have a real peace, because the caliphate, imagine ISIS taking over the world. That's pretty scary. So while they are powerful at the moment, it's a hollow power, because they have, tens of millions of Muslims who don't want to be forced into Sharia, who want freedom as well, like everyone else. So it's kind of reaching out for peace. And the see-through, the drive-through of the story is baseball and its faith, not religious faith, because religion is banned in the United States, and certainly not the opposite is true in the Islamic Empire, but faith in ourselves and faith in each other. And I think coming out of the pandemic, I think we realized how important that is.
To articulate and create this world that the novel takes place in, you definitely have to have a vision for it and even be able to visualize that I don't want to say it's possible, but be able to visualize it actually happening.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You have to make it real. And you can't be shy and unsparing. And you can't worry about cancel culture. I was very proud of myself. I've done a lot of research when I referenced any cultures like Islam. I was careful about the Quran and names and even things down to foods and desserts.
Yeah.
Very respectful. And only one person ever accused me of bigotry, which I'm pretty proud of. In these times, right? You would think, oh my God, how dare you? But I show a rough world, and there's hatred. There's hatred for us against Muslims, and there's hatred for Muslims against us. In my book, the Americans call the Muslims Allahs. They call us crusaders. It's not, you don't mince it, but you have to show the face of hatred and how we get past it. And it's ordinary characters get caught up in extraordinary times. They don't want to be heroes. My main character, Puppy Nidak, is a baseball historian. He dreamed of playing baseball for the Yankees. He hurt his shoulder. He realizes that's not going to happen. Now baseball, its 2098 season, is going to be baseball's last season. That they're going to raise the Amazon Stadium to the ground, and that's it. He doesn't realize what he's about to be swept up in. All his friends, his best friends. The cast, the characters are almost uniformly. You hear Brooklyn now, right?
They're coming for you, Gary. They're coming for you.
Oh my God, I better talk quick. But it's almost all the characters are diverse, because I think it's the 22nd century. And if you create a world where there's no identity politics and it doesn't matter what you are, but who you are, then I think most people should be, it should matter to people. They should be gay or this, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's not, there's a casualness to it. But it's about human beings pushing forward. But you also can see, in 2021, how some things, if left unchecked, might go wrong. One thing, it's not political, but looking ahead in my world, in 2040, all robots with faces are banned because they blended into society and created havoc. They were so good. So now there's only robots without faces, just the metal, so you could tell who they are. Something like that. You go, oh, well. You can certainly see why in 2098 we might not be able to sing the national anthem. Is that so far-fetched? Things like that. It's you want to be accurate, and you want to create. The reader deserves your creativity. The reader deserves a world that you've created, but you have to let them understand how that might have happened.
When you have a novel, particularly like a sci-fi one looking in the future, or honestly any novel, you have to paint that world that you're talking about, that you're living in. But what you also have to do is you have some details placed to how we got there, but the rest is left up to how an individual might interpret it. Anybody can interpret it differently, how the world got to this state this far into the future. How much heat have you got about people making comments on maybe all this is just progressive movement theme that caused this? That's what Gary's trying to say. My point is, you've probably got some heat because there are many different ways to interpret this world and how it got to it.
Yeah, I have, but I always point to the fact that there's no politics per se. There's no contemporary politics. Right. So you can say in the world, abortion's banned, okay, because we lost 17 million people and 4 million children. So we need to restock the population. It's as blunt and simple as that. Well, you can very well make the case that's conservative. But on the other hand, banks are illegal. Well, you could say would be a progressive point of view. And my point is, I'm an independent. I vote for all parties. I vote for the person. That's it. I think it's like 40% of America are independents, at least now. Right. So, and in this world, it's all about individual responsibility. Now, you could say, well, is that just conservative? But the original definition of liberal was the sanctity of the individual. You go back to even the start of our revolution, and people like Rousseau and Locke, all the great, and of course Jefferson, believing in the rights of man. Forgive me, all the women out there, but that's how the reference was. But the rights of man to be free, to be unshackled, to do what they want. Well, you could say that was a very liberal point of view. Now you could say, well, it's conservative. It just shows what nonsense it is to give definitions, because all too often nowadays we give definitions to demonize and polarize And I'm not, I have enough polarization in my world between Muslims and Americans. So without getting into that, but I think it's important to see that things have different meanings in different times, and people view things, differently. And then what I do in book 2, in A Fastball for Freedom, is I open it up so that almost half the book is set in London. So you see what life is like for the Crusaders, and you see, how you get some history about how that happened with NATO and politicians, but again, all fictional politicians.
Right. And if people happen to, in their mind, connect that to something, then that's how they interpret it. So I guess that was how we got, And that is a great thing about any book, right? I mean, you have to suspend imagination and then draw conclusions on the things that happened before and are happening then as the story takes place in the book. So,
right, excuse me. And yes, but no, first of all, your blue is different than my blue. Mm-hmm. So And also, I'm not there to think for you. Okay. There are some characters most of the characters do wrong things at some point. Even the fundamentally good people, as all of us have done things in our lives, and we go, "Oh, geez, I wish I hadn't done it." Right? Who hasn't? Of course. So it's not my job to say, "Oh, this is a bad guy. This is a bad woman. This is wrong." It's up to you, Jeff, and the readers to decide. And so there's no right or wrong in your interpretation. The book doesn't belong. The books are not really mine anymore. If you get a fact wrong, if you get a character's name wrong, okay, that's different. There's a right or wrong. But other than that, it's what you think, which is what it should be about. It's what, I mean, you honored me. We've never met, and you honor me by reading my novel. I mean, you're welcoming me into your imagination. You're in my imagination, and now I'm in yours because it's your imagination interpreting my imagination. That's magical. That's wonderful. We should celebrate those moments because they're beautiful.
I do want to take another second here to talk about the sponsor of this podcast, Good Pods. Like I mentioned earlier in the intro, you can see what podcasts your friends and influencers are listening to. This app is great, and the creators and team Good Pods are very serious about making you the greatest listening experience for podcasts, not only just the quality of the audio listening piece, but also the social aspect. This is a really awesome app. I can't suggest it enough. I'm very involved in there. They're very dedicated to podcasters, independent podcasters, and listeners. I have a couple groups on there you should go check out. The Indie Podcasters group, highlight indie podcasters, obviously. I've also recently created a true crime group. I'm a big true crime fan. You should join both of those groups. And every week, we do pick podcasts out of the Indie Podcasters group to highlight in the recommended section. But once again, I'll say it again, the Good Pods team is a great team of people. I can personally vouch for them, but they're also dedicated to making this app as good as possible. You can talk to them on social media directly. They will respond. They take all recommendations very serious. There's a great team at Good Pods. Make sure you download the Good Pods app and listen to your podcast there. Let's get back to the interview. What year did you first start writing the first book, The Mount Over Hell? And did you had a big vision of the whole story, obviously, going in. You had to have. Are there core principles and values about that story that have changed, or are just small things that have changed overall since the time you started brainstorming these novels till now?
That's an interesting question. It started, my wife and I, in 2016. We were having Sunday breakfast. We were eating bagels with a schmear and listening to the Beatles. And this idea popped into my head. What about baseball's last season in a dystopian America run by something called the family with grandma at the head? Now, I don't know where it came from. There is the insanity of creativity.
Yeah.
If we understood, it would be, be wonderful to bottle that and you make $1 bazillion selling it. And then it just flowed from there. And I said, all right, well, that's a good idea. Now what? So how does America get to that point? What brings America to its knees? And I didn't want to do any environmental. It's just like, oh my God, it's just, so overdone. And so often in dystopian novels, the poor people are in fences and it's ghettos or barrios or what. I mean, the Elysium sort. I mean, it's been done. I thought, okay, America should lose World War III. Well, who do we lose World War III to? To lose to Russia, boring. I mean, we've been through that. We've seen, Red Dawn and all that. To lose to China is also pretty boring, although, that might happen more likely. But Islam is a third rail. It's a hot button. The conflict has been going back for 1,300 years, something like that, between the West and Islam. I mean, the very first war we fought as a country was with the Barbary pirates in 1803. Thomas Jefferson, from the halls of Montezuma. That's what that inspired the Marine hymn. So I wanted to do that. And then it started flowing. And I really wish I could say I've had all what's probably going to be published 1,500 pages in my head. I am not that organized. It's more like controlled chaos. My wife created for me I'm not that organized. My wife created what she called a genius board, which is just like some plywood. And she said, so I could put up all my Post-its with the notes. Okay. And Jeff goes and gets in trouble here and Jeff escapes. And I covered it, the plywood. I mean, I was step back all afternoon. I was so proud of myself. I never looked at it again. Yeah. It flows. Now I know how it's going to end. I know how this novel is going to end. Exactly how I get there is a mystery for me sometimes. I mean, I'm in the first draft of the third book, about 60% through, and suddenly something finally clicked. I said, oh, that makes some things give sense to a lot of things. Yeah. But it was like a big moment. But I said, because I never knew how I was going to get to what I wanted to get to. And that's fun. I mean, otherwise it's boring. Look, I envy writers who can just put those 3-by-inch cards and just write things down and stick it on the wall and no, I can't do that. And it's wonderful because characters surprise me. It sounds very precious. And writers say it, and no one really believes us, that characters take over. I mean, Philip K. Dick, I'm a great fan of his, because of the paranoid zaniness of his dystopian worlds. He was a brilliant writer. But he said, and many writers say that the character will start writing. You'll say, oh, this is what the scene's going to be today. And then it'll just go, the character say, what, are you kidding? Do you really think I'd say or do that? And they take over. And sometimes a character will be completely minor in your head. It'll be a throwaway. There's one character, I know you just started Mount Over Hell, so I don't think you've got to him yet. The Muslim fisherman Azar Mustafa in Barcelona. And in the original draft, he has like one scene, he gets captured and he's released. And that I cut that out. That doesn't, that got thrown away. And then and I thought, all right, that's it. He was kind of grumpy. He was no good. But then I wrote a scene where he goes home to his wife and his 2 sons. And I go, this guy's interesting. And so he's been sticking around. He's like one of the souls, one of the consciences of the novel.
Yeah. So he became more significant in the moment and for your creation. When you started, was there always a plan for trilogy?
At first, I thought it would be maybe 4 books, but I think I could do it in 3. And I'm told that my publisher says the industry prefers trilogies now. Those days of, obviously, there's Harry Potter and there's Game of Thrones, but I think more and more the trend is towards 3 books and out. So I thought, okay, I can finish it up.
Now that we're talking about trends, how do you feel about the trend of the digital age for books? Was that something that was hard to grasp at first because you've been doing it for a while? And what's the impact been on the creator side of that?
I'm all for it. If more people will read and get the book, that's great. That's what I'm there for. So I think it's wonderful. Look, I prefer hard, books, hardcover, paperback. That I just like to hold it. Yeah. I don't, to me, it's hard. I do enough online, reading articles and this and that. But so for me, a book, even going back to when I was a child, I would always, before I went to sleep, I would always read, which I still do. And so it always has a special feeling for me. So I like to hold it. But I think anything that gets people to read in an age, and we can't be illiterate. We need to read. Sometimes I worry about, whether people are reading enough. And I think that's really, but also whether you're with cancel culture, whether we will be allowed, future generations be allowed to think as they have to. I am not politically correct by novels. Now, I never willfully disrespect anyone. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in like gratuitous violence or certainly sex or language, but I take on sacred cows, whether you like it or not. But it's not directed at anyone. But nowadays, you don't know what you're going to run afoul of. But I think we need to talk, because as I'm writing science fiction, I'm giving you the future, but the future is the summation of our past. And we always have to remember history. And I'm a big history buff, and we need to be able to read history and discuss history, which is sometimes ugly. But right, it doesn't mean, because we're saying, well, why did this happen? Doesn't mean we think it was good it happened or that we would have done it, but we have to understand why and understand of those times. And there's a difference between saying, okay, people behaved like this in those times, that was wrong, but there was a reason why, rather than just rejecting, oh my God, it's terrible, we can't deal with it, they're awful people, because how are we going to learn? How are we not going to make the same mistake?
Yeah, you have to have more than one viewpoint or opinion available as far as educationally speaking, research, history goes. I remember reading school books, been forever now, but Sacco and Vanzetti were always kind of the trial and all that. They were victims and all that. But those guys they were terrorists, right?
Yeah.
But sure. the books, it's your school books, textbooks they kind of left that piece out of it. So it is important to have more than one viewpoint available for people to read. And that's part of development in your creativity side. You will come to the conclusions and become the person you are. But it needs to be available.
Yes, exactly. And you need to be able to question and think and say, no, that's not right. Or I don't agree with it. And to have these options, we have to be careful that we don't whitewash history. That you're absolutely right. Look at the Rosenbergs, the communist spies in the 50s. I mean, I've read books and movies. Oh, they were railroaded. No, no, they were traitors. They sold secrets to the Russians, nuclear secrets. That's horrible. But again, you have to be careful what you read. And I think history, I love history books, but it's becoming increasingly hard to read history without there being a specific point of view, which is, unfortunate. I'm reading a wonderful history book now called simply JFK 1917 to 56, won the Pulitzer Prize, about Kennedy's, from his birth to when he, in 1956, before he decided he was going to run for president. And it's honest, but it gives you both sides, which is great. It's not glorifying or demonizing. It's just swept up in it. And I think there's nothing like wonderful history.
Have you kind of gathered and gained that throughout the years? Your viewpoints changed any from youth to now?
Oh, yes. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'll give you like one example. When I was younger, I was for the death penalty, and I'm not anymore.
Yeah.
I was, wasn't that long ago, but I supported, Bush's war in Iraq. I don't believe in nation building wars anymore. Obviously, if we have enemies, take them out. Don't even think about that. But to build a nation, to send, to wreck a nation and to, sacrifice thousands of American soldiers and civilians, I would not support that again. So, things change. Now, those are two liberal points of view. I changed my mind to some conservative points of view. But you should be able to change your mind. Goodness, right?
Yeah, which is the big part of this series of novels. They are touching on that. You can interpret them differently, but that is the underlying concept of the world that takes place then.
Yes.
And I can't. Everybody should be open to reading, different things that even if you don't always agree with it, you will maybe have a better understanding of individuals that have that point of view.
Right.
So,
we've all had those instances where we wanted to yell at a book or a TV screen, right, or a movie. But that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. It makes you think.
Yep. And educate along the way. What would you say to somebody starting out in this society that we live in now that would be afraid of being too creative?
No, I'm sorry. I think if you're going to be creative, go full blown. That's it. I think you should show respect, but I think you have to be honest and you have to write what you need to write about. And I think writing or in any way you create, you've got to do what you feel in your heart.
What's after this series? I mean, is your brain constantly thinking about the next thing, or are you pretty deadlocked on what you're doing now?
I'm pretty deadlocked right now on finishing the book. I'm working on we'll see if this goes anywhere, on a graphic novel idea with a friend of mine, which I've always wanted to write a graphic novel. Mm-hmm. Maybe I have no idea how to do it, but at least, it could be like, whoa, what a disaster. But, so what? You have to try. My plays, I'm hoping to get a black and white cookie, that play up this year, which looks at prejudice. And it uses anti-Semitism as a window into prejudice. My books often explore diverse people coming together. And I think that's really, really important in our world, because the things that unite us are far, far deeper than the things that divide us.
It started out with writing for you, I assume, right? That's, or correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I was when I got out of college, I went a year to law school.
Okay.
And I said, oh my God, I hate these people. I hate these people. Are awful. They're dishonest. I could see where lawyers come from. I'm not a big fan of lawyers or the legal profession. As I said, lawyers abandoned in the society of my novels. And then just one night, so much of life can be just chalked up to flukes and chances, coincidence. Although Albert Einstein said that coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous author, which I love. But
right, yep.
And I was going back to my old alma mater at Stony Brook, and there was a pub in the basement of my old dorm, and I was just sitting there drinking my beer, several in fact, and I ran into a friend who said, "Oh, we're looking for people to be part-time sports writers covering high school sports for Newsday on Long Island." I said, "Really? I'd love to do that." And so I started in journalism, and I left law school after a year with great joy. And because back then, journalists, it was really, you were doing the Lord's work. You were educating people in a democracy. Talk about letting people know. Yeah. Now it's just journalism is shot to hell as far as I'm concerned. It's very sad. But there was a time, back in the days, you were proud to be a journalist.
Boots on the ground. Yep.
Yep. You were supposed to tell the truth no matter what, no matter who it took down. This was your job. And you actually had to have, people confirming your sources. You just couldn't say, oops, sorry, got it wrong. No, because you'd be gone.
You didn't want to print. Yeah, you didn't want the paper to have to print something the next day.
Yes, because you're fired. I mean, that's how you lose your job. And that was how it was.
You got the vision there sitting in that public you talked about. You got into journalism. How long would you say it took before you thought, in an encouraging way, you thought, because sometimes you'll have negative thoughts about your career, obviously. Yeah. But how long do you think it took before you said, this is literally something I can do for the rest of my life? And at what point did you feel as comfortable enough creatively to start branching out to all these different things you've done since then?
I think after journalism, at the Newsday, I went to the Cincinnati Post, and then I wrote for professional wrestling magazines.
Oh,
I don't know if you're a wrestling fan.
Yeah,
but
huge.
Oh, okay. Well, I was one of the founding editors and writers of PWI.
Didn't know that. Yeah.
Yes.
That's all to you. That's awesome.
Yes. So back, the Apter magazines, as they're often called, Bill, and I work with the great Bill Apter and Stu Sachs.
He is great people.
Yeah. Yes. We were, the rock stars. And you think about wrestling. Remember wrestling, late 70s, early 80s. There's no internet, obviously. Right. There's no cable TV. So if, you're a wrestling fan in Philadelphia, how do you know what happened in, the NWA? You didn't. But so we were the magazine of information. And on the newsstands, we outsold Sports Illustrated. It was the kayfabe back in the day. Before, it was like, so I'll give you an idea. What we did is we get a photograph. Say, we all sit around the editor's desk, and we'd select a photograph for the cover, and say it was Andre the Giant. So it was Andre the Giant, and then we come up with a headline: "The Secret Agony of Andre the Giant." And then I'd go back to my desk, and I'd write a 3-page story on the secret agony of Andre the Giant, making it all up. Now, I had great latitude. We all did about what we could write as long as we followed the script. We couldn't suddenly make Andre a rule breaker, it was called rule breaker back in those days, or a bad guy, a good guy. It had to be what that was happening in the ring. And that's what we did. And I was myself, and I was also the persona of Matt Brock, who was an old drunk reporter. So, grizzled and bitter and cynical. And I did that for 3.5 years.
That's actually really neat. We'll have to talk more about that one day for sure. That's very interesting. So you build up the confidence though to move on and start branching out and do all these things. What about theater? When was your first dabbling with that?
My first play was actually 2005, called Ponzi Man. And it was inspired because my former brother-in-law stole $250 million. He was Ponzi. He pulled the biggest Ponzi scheme in American history before Bernie Madoff. And so it was inspired by Reed Slatkin, who was a minister of the Church of Scientology, and he went to jail for like 11 years or something. So, the theater is wonderful because it is collaborative. And so, novels, good or bad, whether you like it or not, it's only my name on it. I can't say blame anyone else. But collaboration, it's fascinating because you're working with people who bring your words and your stories to life, and they do it in ways that sometimes you didn't anticipate, but you go, wow, that's great. Or the director does something. Oh, wow, that's really cool. The actors, I didn't really think about that. And when you work with actors in a theater, they create their own backstories because you can only create, you're not giving 10 pages of history, but they come up with their own. It's like, oh, wow, that's good. I wish I thought about that. So theater. And then I love theater. There's nothing like both the exhilaration and anxiety of sitting in a theater as the lights come up with other people worrying how they're going to react. Like, everyone's very quiet. Why isn't anyone laughing? They hate it. They're bored.
It's real time. It's real time response to your creativity too, right? Like a novel, you send some. There's different ways to market and get feeling for a novel and sitcoms and stuff like that. You can send out fillers and all that before, but you will not have that in face or direct and how somebody's going to react to your body of work. You definitely have that with theater.
Yeah, that makes it pretty special. Again, it's nerve wracking, but it's just fascinating. It's just wonderful. When people are laughing at your words or they're moved by your words, that's remarkable. Yes, I love the theater.
What you've done is really in line with what I've kind of the message and what I'm doing with this podcast, trying to inspire and highlight creators, but by highlighting people, hopefully will be inspired to not be afraid to take that jump and do that. Yeah, there are failures along the way, but that's just like anything else in life. Being a creator of something could be anything is no different. And I think it's incredible what you've done over your career.
Well, thank you very much. If you want to create, you have to create. Often people say, oh, well, I'd like to write a novel and I have a great idea. So, okay, write it. You just don't talk about it. You got to write it, but you also have to be prepared to work hard because it's hard work. My last novel was 650 manuscript pages and I did like 9 drafts. And I have a document of some 200 pages, deleted pages that I cut out. So you really have to be willing to cut and change your mind and go with the flow and not be afraid of what you're writing, but you've got to write, and you've got to write every day. I mean, I tell you, there's a lot of rubbish about writing tips, but one of the best things I ever read was from Philip Roth, who said, when you write, don't write yourself into exhaustion. Save a paragraph, a few lines to use the next day to get you going, so you don't have to stare at that horrible blank page. Because that's like, oh no, nothing's coming. Oh my God, what am I going to do?
And you can't let deadlines get to you or it will probably consume you, I imagine.
Yes, you got to push on and try to write if you can every day, even if it's not a lot. Just be willing and open and say what you feel in your heart.
Yeah.
You can't pander. You can't pull punches. You've got to write what needs to be said.
Yeah. And again, I really appreciate you taking the time to tell your story and give your advice to people today. It's great. I'll go ahead and give you a minute to plug and promote your latest novel that you want people to go check out.
my novels, A Mound Over Hell and A Fastball for Freedom, dystopian science fiction baseball, available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Google Books, Apple, Bookshop, anywhere, all over the world.
Yeah, and I highly suggest everybody check it out and support Gary and, support creators. So we'll be in touch. Thanks, Gary.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Take care.
Really do appreciate you listening to this episode and checking it out. I hope you continue to do so with the next. I hope you have an appreciation for what I'm trying to do here, highlight all the different things all sorts of different creators are doing. I hope you get behind me on that and continue to join me on my journey. I'm Podcast Father, the Indie Podcaster. See you next time.